Hi, everybody. It's Jay, and I am back in the booth with you for another sneak peek video preview for this week's new release here on Say with Jay. Our new release this week is The Cowboy's Enemy. It's the 9th book in Jessie Gussman's original Sweetwater Ranch Western Cowboy romance series. The Cowboy's Enemy is the story of Abner Coblantz. Abner, we've met in previous books in this series. He's a member of Clay Striker's Harvest Crew. And Abner, it's fair to say, is easily the most enigmatic member of the crew. He is very quiet, very shy, but he always seems to know things or pick up on things that no one else seems to. He likes Raina's cooking. And he describes himself as ex-Amish, but he won't say why. It's also the story of Cora Fisher. Cora, it's safe to say, has a life that has not gone the way she had planned or hoped it would. She finds herself living in poverty with 6 children from 3 different men, and she's now faced with the crisis of losing her home. The Cowboy's Enemy begins with Abner returning home to rural Ohio, where he's come for the funeral of his grandmother. He soon runs into the reason why he left in the first place, Cora. Now, they have very strong reasons for disliking each other, and I won't spoil them here. But can the feelings that Abner realizes he still has for Cora overcome his anger toward her? Can Cora overcome her own anger and her own pride and fear of depending on another person, including another man, and allow Abner to help her? Is it possible that these two will realize that together they're stronger than they are apart? Now, of course, you know you've got to come back this Friday to find out. But before I share this little sample preview of The Cowboy's Enemy with you, I wanted to touch on a Bible story that Jessie tells in this story. And aside from the context that it's used within the book, this story has made me think about ways it can apply to our daily lives. I'm talking about the story of the woman and the well, or the woman at the well, excuse me. The woman at the well, in case you need a refresher, is in the 4th chapter of the book of John. And in this story, Jesus and his disciples are traveling back from Judea to Galilee, and they stop around noon at a well outside of a Samaritan town. Now, the disciples go into the town to buy some food, and Jesus is left there alone to rest. A Samaritan woman comes out to the well, and you can, the fact that she's coming to the well alone and at noon is an indicator that she's a social outcast. Back in that day, women would gather in groups either in the early morning hours or at the end of the day to gather their water, and it was kind of a social gathering. So the fact that she's there alone and at noon is kind of an indicator of her social standing. At any rate, Jesus asks the woman for a drink, and she's taken aback because that's not something a Jewish man would ask of a Samaritan woman, or even speaking to a Samaritan at all would be unexpected because, if you remember from the story of the Good Samaritan, the fact that it was so powerful is because the Samaritans weren't liked at all by either Jews or Gentiles. So, anyway, Jesus not only asks her for a drink, but he continues to talk to her and begins to share his message. And she's further taken aback when he reveals to her that he knows that she's been married 5 times and is living with a man who's not her husband. He really sends her over the top when, as he's sharing his teachings, he reveals that he is the Messiah. The woman is so overcome that she leaves her water jar at the well, like the disciples left their nets, and runs into the village to tell people about Jesus and what she's learned, and to encourage them and invite them to come and talk to him and learn from him. She literally, on the spot, becomes a disciple and an evangelist for God. I mention this because I think it's such a great reminder of what God wants for and from us. He wants us to know him. He wants to share his message with us. But he also wants us to use our lives, to use our talents, our gifts, and to use those gifts for the sake of others. So, I hope you will listen to this preview of The Cowboy's Enemy, and then go out today and use your gifts for the sake of others and make this world a better place. Oh, and do come back this Friday for the full release here on Say with Jay.
Hey. His voice came from the oak beside the fence, and she strained to see, finally walking a few feet beyond the burning embers and then able to make out his outline sitting at the base of the tree, leaning against it. "Mind if I join you?" she asked. "Love it." He didn't hesitate, although his voice was low and sounded a little sad. She sat a quarter of the way around the tree with her back to it. It wasn't a massive trunk, and she could still reach behind her and touch him, although she didn't. They sat in silence for a while. Low clouds raced across the moon, and the wind rattling branches and causing the leaves that hadn't yet fallen to make a sandy, rustling sound. A car went by down the block on the main street, and on the other side of town, a dog barked. Cora twisted her fingers in her lap. She'd wanted to thank him, but when she spoke, that wasn't what she said. "You've been here over a week, yet you haven't gone to see your Amish family. Why not?" She was prying. She hadn't meant to, but that was a question that had been popping up in her mind. The wind swept her words away. Knowing that it must be a hard subject for him, but unwilling to let it go yet, she spoke gently. "When we dated before, you mentioned that your dad and a brother had died and you'd gone to live with your real mom. I got the feeling there was more to the story." He blew out a slow breath, then spoke slowly. "There is." "You don't have to tell me, of course. You're just so good with the kids, and you've been amazing with us, and I wanted to thank you. I just also thought you probably have a real family who'd like to see you." "No, they don't want to see me." "That can't be true." "I killed my dad and brother." She gasped and straightened, a little spiral of fear twisting in her chest and pinching her stomach. But it was Abner, and immediately she knew there was more to the story. She leaned back against the tree, the rough bark cutting through her coat. "I know that isn't what it sounds like," she said matter-of-factly. "Yeah. I was on the roof, and my dad and brother were standing below. Dad was explaining something to my brother, and he handed up a piece of metal to me. I wasn't ready for it. I'd taken my glove off for some reason. The edge sliced my hand when I went to grab for it. I'd have died rather than let go, but the blood made it slippery and I just couldn't hold it." He blew out a breath and moved like he just couldn't sit still. "Know how many times I've relived that moment? Wish I could have squeezed tighter with my hand or flipped the piece of metal up somehow." He swallowed, and the sound felt loud and agonized in the darkness. "Just wish I could redo. I would jump off the roof before I'd let it slip out of my hand again." There was silence for a bit before he finished in a low voice. "Hit them both in the neck. Got the people in the house to call, but no details. Just neither one made it more than a couple of minutes." "Oh, wow. That's awful." Her stomach had jerked into a quivering ball. It wasn't hard to imagine what the sharp side of a piece of metal would do to the flesh of a man's neck. "You didn't do it on purpose. Couldn't your mother forgive you?" "She wasn't my mother." He shifted, and she turned to see him peering at her in the dark. "My father slept with my birth mother not long before he married his Amish wife. Then he brought me to live with them just a few months before my brother was born. If I were Mam, I wouldn't like me either." Maybe that explained why he'd always worked so hard back when they were in high school. She'd heard rumors that he'd do anything and never complain. She'd always figured he was raised that way, but maybe he'd started out trying to earn his mother's favor. What child doesn't want their mother to love them?
Hi, this is Jay, and thanks for listening. If you're ready for another great audiobook, here's one we think you might like. Or check out the playlist with all our latest releases. Don't forget to subscribe to Say with Jay, give this video a thumbs up, and tell us what you liked in the comments.